Rachel Huizinga. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Queen's Journal.
I'm Matt Skase, and I'm this year's managing editor for the Queen's Journal.
Constantly felt like we were on our feet, seeing what would happen. The restrictions changed so much, so many times. But then what came out of that was a lot of pandemic reporting, which really affected our page views, I think, and engagement with the journal. We heard feedback that students were finding out how to get tested and where to get tested through our coverage because they weren't seeing it communicated to them anywhere else. I mean, as many downs as this year has caused for not just the journal, but people and schools everywhere, it did bring more engagement back to the journal, which I'm really happy about.
In a very broad sense, it was a year that not a lot happened, but so much did at the same time.
There were three really main things that all intersected with each other, which was the pandemic, obviously, the transition to completely pretty much remote learning, and the student advocacy and anti-racism efforts kind of all started picking up at the same time and then sort of coming together in different ways throughout the year. People were wondering if September was going to be online or in person. People were wondering then if January was going to be online or in person. So that kept progressing throughout the whole year. And then I think because people really were forced to see things how they are because everything was online and not in person. So I think that gave people more time as well to be advocates, and students especially started going to the administration with demands for action on anti-racism things, and at the same time students were struggling with remote learning and academic accommodations and time zone differences, and also just dealing with the fact that a pandemic is happening and in some cases losing loved ones to COVID-19 or sacrificing a lot because of COVID-19. So I think those things just kept playing together and coming together throughout the year. We saw Reform Smith come together and really advocate for action in the Smith School of Business, and that action plan was just released a few days ago, and that was largely through them. A lot of other things changed and have progressed in more areas than in others, but I think a lot did happen this year.
Yeah. Things felt really good for a long time here, and then all of a sudden, that's how fast things can change. It can feel like 1 second we're going back in the green zone and we're getting a vaccine, and then next thing you know, the variant is 2/3 of cases and we have to shut things back down. So
I think people could look back on this volume 148 as the pandemic year and see how things played out through our coverage, which I think is really, really cool. I think our staff did an amazing job responding to the pandemic this year in a lot of different ways. I just think that there's just a cultural change. I don't think that there's this happened and then everyone forgets about it.
I think every year there is a crisis in engagement. I think it's been going for a long time now. If you were away from Queens, if you're just off campus all year and you're away from your friends, that's going to be coming back to campus. I can't even imagine how amazing that's going to feel. Living in residence and not having the same experience as someone pre-pandemic where you get orientation week and, floor dinners and, meet a ton of people. All those experiences hopefully will be able to come back within the next, hopefully by September, not in full obviously, but in some fashion. I think that there's going to be sort of a new appreciation for those things.
I think that this year a lot of people were forced to consider what's really important to them, and I think that goes for clubs and services and operations and administrations, and that's where a lot of the student advocacy came in this year, because once you take away in-person interactions, once you take away the lecture halls, once you strip everything down, what is there, and that exposed a lot of problems at Queen's and in the AMS and in the journal. So I think that's where a lot of progress happened this year, and when people do start coming back, those changes will be more obvious. This year was like COVID happening and operations and things shutting down everywhere. And then next year, like 2021 to 22, is going to be vaccines and how we recover from the pandemic. So I think people at Queens, like, I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This was a really hard year for a lot of students. Sitting in your bedroom and doing course work and not seeing anyone is just exhausting and depressing. The journal got better in a lot of other ways and has started making steps in a lot of other ways because of people who stood up and asked for change. So I'm excited to see where the journal goes next year and in the years beyond. And there was more time to kind of look at how we function, and that's in a few different areas. Like some of our positions have become waged going into Volume 149, which is really, really good because it takes a lot of work to put this paper together, and that is for the most part unpaid work. It's honorarium work. So we've been able to bring in some waged positions next year, which is really, really good. But we also had changes to the journal in terms of like how our policies work and how the journal interacts with vulnerable communities. And that was a lot through our features editor, Aisha, really just advocating for those changes and speaking up and suggesting things like the BIPOC Advisory Board and pointing out the areas where the journal can really improve. And she's going to be one of the editors-in-chief next year. And so I think, I don't know, it just feels good to know that that's happening and that the journal made a few steps this year, but she's going to take it. Her and Shelby, her co-editor-in-chief, are going to take it so much farther.
The pandemic sort of cut through a lot of the noise that sort of permeates daily life pre-pandemic. And I think there was always this like impending sense of doom with the journal that there's going to be, somebody will have an issue with their pay structure or something.
Oh, yeah.
And it was something that definitely went unaddressed for a really long time. And I think just the organism that it is when you're in person, like a lot of things can get swept under the rug, especially in terms of culture and just overworking yourself. And it definitely clarified a lot of or made a lot of these things more clear and really forced us to change them, because I think before we got away with not acknowledging them, I think it needed to happen sooner rather than later. And there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. It's so far from over. A lot of that work will happen next year, I think, with the new editors and next year's team, because I think there's a lot of momentum going into it.
Yeah, for sure.
But the way Lauren says windmills.
Windmills. It's so cute. It's so cute. I'm obsessed. Video's made an incredible video about the windmills on Long
Up
Island.
to 6 a.m. for that one.
Yeah, just windmills. And I also really love delivering the paper.
Yeah.
Those are every other Saturday. Matt and I will come here and pick up the papers and then drive around. We really don't care when the blue box gets over with our newspapers.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the effect on us you might think it does. We just pick it back up. I don't know, this is a weird misconception about the journal. We don't actually really want to be in this house. This house is terrible. We got new floors last summer, and when the people were pulling up the old floorboards, there was like black mold underneath, and they
one
ran
of the
outside.
workers vomited.
Yeah, they ran outside throwing up.
Yeah, I heard it in my window.
Yeah,
It's like, oh.
it felt bad. But no, we don't really, it's not really a choice for the journal to be in this house, and we are hoping to move out of this house into like real offices.
Yes.
In the ARC at some point. I don't know. I'm gonna miss everything, I guess. And I mean, I think I'm ready to move on and start the next chapter, so to speak. Going to miss the people a lot. I think student journalists and student newspapers have to be really active and always finding new ways to do different things. And I think I'm gonna miss that. I'm gonna miss the way it feels when we put out a really good story or a good video or illustrations or photos or whatever. People really, I think this year, really put themselves out there with the stories they wrote. People who were interviewed and people on staff who wrote like postscripts and editorials and stuff, like really became vulnerable and opened up, and I think that's I don't think you can get that at many non-student journals and newspapers. So I don't know. It just holds a very special place in my heart. So I think to answer the question, I'm gonna miss everything, the people and the stuff that we do.
The community at the Journal is kind of its own. It's like nothing you'll ever experience in your life, I don't think. It's definitely a very large chapter, and it represents a lot for me. And to move on from that for good is going to be very odd experience.
Any student can write for the Journal. You can take photos, you can draw pictures, you can film videos. There are new positions opening up next year for social media management. So I mean, the Journal is progressing and growing in a lot of ways, and even if you're not on the masthead, there's a lot of ways to get involved and kickstart your writing career, your photography career, your illustrations. Everything goes up on our website, so there's a portfolio you can use when applying for jobs and stuff. I feel like don't be afraid to reach out and ask to get involved, because I think that's how everyone starts.